The New Orleans Saints 2024 offseason approach may not lead to a better roster, but it certainly gives us an idea about how unsuccessful the 2023 offseason approach was. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be looking for at rookie mini camps. Even though we're not going to see a lot, there's still some takeaways that I'm hoping that we'll be able to get from that time. I'm also going to explain to you why, even though the New Orleans Saints roster may not necessarily have made a marked improvement over the course of the offseason, that the team can still get better. And actually, I want to start with that idea of the marked improvement on the roster. Why do I feel that they haven't made those types of improvements, and why it tells us that the New Orleans Saints 2023 offseason approach was mostly unsuccessful? We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day, every day, and being an everydayer here on Locked On Saints, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. So as I look at where the New Orleans Saints have done most of their offseason work to this point, free agency, the draft, all that, I got to say that I don't really feel that the Saints roster has made a significant or even a marked improvement in terms of its talent based on unknowns that we currently have being added to this New Orleans Saints roster. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think it's bad to get worse. I don't think it's bad to stay basically the same. I think that it also goes to show the approach that the Saints have taken here in the 2024 offseason, that the approach that they took in the 2023 offseason was unsuccessful. And look, missing the playoffs for a third year in a row probably already told you that. You're going, well, yeah, duh, of course, Ross. I know. But let me explain. From 2022 into 2023, the Saints decided to retain Pete Carmichael as their offensive coordinator. I'm sorry to bring back bad memories, but let's start there. When they did that, the first thing that I said was, what the Saints are telling you is that they believe that the personnel was the problem, not the coaching. This year, going from 2023 into 2024, after going out and finding a new quarterback, after kind of rebuilding different plate pieces on the roster, making sort of bigger roster changes in 2023 than we have seen here in 2024, they now come into 2024 going, oh no, we have to redo the roster, or we have to redo the coaching staff now. So they spent that time revamping the roster, but not revamping their coaching staff, particularly on the offensive side of the football. They made some defensive coaching staff changes, defensive coordinator, all that. Which was wise to go from 2 defensive coordinators to 1 defensive coordinator. But in 2024, they haven't made drastic changes on their roster outside of the ones that they were basically forced into making, attrition leading to them departing players, leading to them having to fill holes, things like that. But I'd argue that there are still holes that they haven't addressed yet on this roster. And instead of making the roster changes, the personnel changes, trying to boost the talent on the roster, they go with the coaching staff. And they revamp the coaching staff for good reason. And they revamp the entire coaching staff with the exception of Clancy Brown when it comes to the major decision makers, position coaches, offensive coordinator. He's the only one that's a holdover. You got some offensive assistants, Jari Evans, all them that hung around, but coaching staff, offensive coordinator, position coach-wise, Barone's the only one to hang around, and for a good reason. So I think what the Saints are effectively doing here is a 2-year process of don't have the coaching staff, don't have the roster, go and get the roster in 2023. Then they get into 2024 and they go, okay, got the roster, maintain the roster, or as much of the roster as you can, go get the coaching staff, especially with Dennis Allen being so connected to the Kubiak family, all those other things. Like, this was the perfect opportunity for them to go and get the offensive coordinator that they wanted in Klint Kubiak, who, wouldn't have had the year with San Francisco if they would have hired him into the position last year. I don't even know if he was an OC candidate last year, right? So I don't even know if he was part of those conversations. So I think that that's what this tells us, is that it tells us that the different approach and message from them from 2022 to 2023 was unsuccessful. And now they're having to do more here in 2024's offseason. So what will it lead to? Well, it hasn't led to an improved roster, but it has led to an improved coaching staff. So we'll get to that in a little bit about how the coaching staff can help to improve and how the Saints could still benefit their roster if they decided to, get froggy and leap a little bit. But if we look at this position by position or position group by position group, I think it's hard to make arguments about the Saints making big improvements. So what I'm going to do, because I know sometimes I'll say something like, this player has a lot of talent and could potentially push for a roster spot. And what people hear is, oh, you're out here trying to say that he's the greatest tight end to ever play the game. No. Like, you're taking it from like 40 to 100 very, very quickly. So let me do it this way. If I look at the New Orleans Saints offensive line from 2023, starting at week 1, Trevor Penning, James Hurst, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Ryan Ramczyk, right? And James Hurst has since retired. Trevor Penning was a question mark, all this other stuff. Ryan Ramczyk might medically retire. We'll see what happens there. But in any case, with those 5, let's just give them a point value of 72 last season. Doesn't matter if we agree or disagree, anything like that. I don't even know if I agree with that, but I'm just going to give them a point value of 72. Then we flip that to this year, Trevor Penning at left tackle, big old question mark at left guard, Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and then Taliesin Fuanga, who we expect to be the starter at right tackle if Ryan Ramczyk is not ready to go, which at this point, it just doesn't look like Ryan Ramczyk is going to be ready to go. I'd be shocked at this point if he starts, but we'll see. Can you say that they've improved to an 80 with a massive question mark at one of those positions? Can you say that they've improved to a 90 with 2 question marks effectively at tackle, even though we feel really good about Taliesin Fuanga? He's a rookie. So if we put all rookies at the baseline of unknown, can you really say that they've made a marked improvement from where they were last year? I don't think you can. You can make the argument that they went from 72 to 75. I don't know how, but you can make that argument. But that's not a marked improvement, right? I'm talking about them moving into a whole other letter grade's worth of increased value here. Let's look at wide receiver. Lost Michael Thomas, lost Keith Kirkwood, lost Lynn Bowden, brought in Cedric Wilson, Equanimous St. Brown, Stanley Morgan Jr., all through free agency, and then drafted Bub Means in the 5th round. Then they retained Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry. So if we said that the wide receiver core last year was at an 82, did they move to the 90s? I don't think that they have. And that's even with me not looking at Michael Thomas as a big-time impact player, right? I'm looking at him as what he was in 2023. And so I don't know that you've made the big leap to step forward. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The bad thing would be getting considerably worse. Quarterback's the same. Derek Carr. You can argue about backup quarterbacks all you want. I'm not wasting my time. Derek Carr is the one on the field, was the one on the field last year. He'll be the one on the field this year. It's the same. Tight ends, you lost Jimmy Graham. You add Dallin Holker. Hard to say that you improved. You mostly remain the same. You might even make the argument that they got worse because the red zone threat of Jimmy Graham is no longer present. Sure. I don't think I would go that far, but sure. Running backs stay the same, although, and maybe this is the one that I look at and go, okay, you might get better here. A healthy Kendre Miller moves the needle big time. Safety's effectively the same. Yes, you had Marcus May last year, but he played 17 games for you over the course of the last 2 seasons. You got better safety play out of both Jordan Howden and Jonathan Abram. They're back on the roster, and they add Will Harris. You're effectively at the same place, but you've added Will Harris. Cornerback, if you trade away Marshawn Lattimore, you get worse, period, right? Like Kool-Aid McKinstry, we got a lot of faith in him, got a lot of faith in his game, all those other things, but rookie, unknown, right? Defensive line, effectively the same. You add Christian Boyd, rookie, unknown. Linebacker, you got better. You added Willie Gay. But that's kind of the only place where you can really say, okay, there was a marked improvement, right? Because Willie Gay, at the very least, increases or improves your 3rd linebacker. At the most, improves on your 2nd linebacker. Not a bad situation there. As for the defensive line, don't fully know yet. They add Christian Boyd in the draft, rookie, so he gets that unknown tag. And then Chase Young, neck surgery, neck procedure, and everything like that. Still kind of an unknown as well. But I think you get better there. I think that's a spot that you get better. So as I just look over these notes, I have a hard time saying that the New Orleans Saints have gotten better, have improved, markedly improved. Maybe a little bit improved in certain areas, but as a whole, kind of just remain the same. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing because, and this is what I want to get to next, what the Saints told us this offseason, which is different from last offseason, is that, hey, the roster isn't the problem. It was the coaching staff. And so then they went out and they changed the coaching staff, particularly over on the offensive side of the football. So let's break that down. How the New Orleans Saints get better with their new coaching staff, and some moves that are still out there that I think that the Saints should consider making that could improve some of these positions, particularly on the offensive side of the football. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Look, sometimes everybody needs an opportunity to get something off their chest, whether it's big or it's small. Certain things like that can really start to get to you. So it's really good to find somebody unbiased in your life that will kind of let you let all of that out. So today I want to tell you about a little something that how I feel about it. And you might be feeling the same way this week as well. I wish the NFL would just release the schedule. The schedule release pomp and circumstance is the least entertaining thing outside of maybe the Pro Bowl that the NFL continuously tries to shove down everybody's throats. And I wish that they would just release the schedule. Like, just give us the schedule. Let us know so that we can all move on with our lives. I don't need a 5-hour special to figure out who plays where and how many primetime games, everything like that. I'm over it. I don't need it. Look, therapy can look different for everybody. Sometimes it's not, you got bigger problems than sports schedules being released and things like that. But for the things that are important that you want to get off your chest every once in a while, if you've been thinking about trying therapy, BetterHelp is the way to go. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Just visit betterhelp.com/lockedon for 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, family. Even though the New Orleans Saints roster might not see marked improvements over the course of the offseason, it doesn't mean that the team can't get better on the field in 2024. Appreciate you very much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Want to make sure you know all about that Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream. I don't know the noise that just came out of my mouth, but I'm rolling with it. It's going to be fine. So make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports Today. If you've got ESPN, Fox Sports, tired of hearing about people yelling and screaming and evaluations on baseball caps, like, please, come on, let's move on. You can find it over at the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream without all the yelling, but all the big stories covered by people that know the teams the best, that cover them every single day, just like we do here on Locked On Saints. So make sure you go and check it out, Locked On Sports Today. You can find it for free on YouTube. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So the New Orleans Saints roster might not have improved, but as I kept mentioning in the first part of today's show, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, right? Bad thing would be walking backwards, taking a lot of steps backwards on your roster. I don't know that I can convincingly say that the Saints have done that. Just like I can't convincingly say that their offensive line went from 72 to 80. I'm also not sure that their offensive line went from 72 down to 60. Now, it might be down to 68 because they don't have a starting left guard, and that's got to mean something. But outside of that, all these other positions staying the same at quarterback, effectively staying the same at wide receiver, though losing Michael Thomas, but adding some other people that might be able to help to fill the volume of that role, which again was not that much in 2023. Tight end remaining the same, running backs effectively remaining the same, but you get the healthy Kendre Miller. We broke down the defense too. Like, I don't think any unit really took major steps forward in terms of massive boost in improvement, like a T. Higgins trade would have improved the wide receiver room, or like a drafting a Tyler Nubin would have improved the safety room or whatever. Like, those are convincingly big moves, but the losses that the Saints had this offseason as well were mostly rotational guys, or guys that contributed on a secondary or tertiary level, with the exception of Marcus May. But because of his injuries, suspensions, things like that, you didn't really notice you're not even probably going to notice that he's gone. And so I don't think that the Saints really took many steps back either. And I think that that's important because, as we highlighted, the Saints are saying something different about their roster in 2024 than they said about in 2023, but they're also saying something different about their coaching staff in 2024 than they said about 2023, in that they fired all of them, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. The Saints fired their entire offensive coaching staff, with the exception of Klint Kubiak, from 2023. You don't just do that. And don't get me wrong, actually, they didn't fire the entire group, right? Joel Thomas got another gig over in New York, all the other stuff. But for the most part, they moved on from everybody on their offensive coaching staff. And so that's where I think that the Saints are looking at improvements. I think what the Saints are saying now, which is different than what they were saying last year, forgive me if I'm repeating this, but I do want to make sure that I drive this home, because I think that this is really like the big thing here, or amongst the big things here, is that what they're saying now is that it wasn't the roster's fault. And if you'll remember, as we went through like the entirety of the 2023 season, what was the mantra? the roster is talented, but the coaching staff hasn't taken advantage of that talent. That was the criticism for at least like the first 10 or so weeks of the season. And then everybody kind of started to get on the well, I guess it was earlier than that everybody started to get on the Derek Carr thing. But even there was like like the Venn diagram was larger when it came to those criticizing Pete Carmichael in the system and those criticizing Derek Carr. And then eventually it kind of all became Derek Carr after a while. And I'll leave you to believe or decide what's fair, what's not fair. For me, everybody shares in the blame. But everybody kind of moved off the idea that it was the coaching staff. And I never moved off of that because I don't think that the Saints ever really figured it out. I think that the players figured it out, but I don't know that Pete Carmichael ever really figured out how to use the offense and use the players on offense. Like, why was Rashid Shaheed deployed out of the backfield, once in week 1 and then like never again for the rest of the season? Why did we see motion against the New England Patriots, but then not see it again for a few weeks? Why do we see Taysom Hill utilized to, perfection in one game and then forgotten in the next game? Why do we see runs on 2nd and 10 after incomplete passes? All these other things, right? So I think that the thing that I want to highlight out of all of this is that the Saints have made a wise decision here and said, you know what? It's the scheme. It's the philosophy. Let's go and instead of trying to recapture old flames, let's go and get a scheme that works for today's players. And I'm not even talking about the idea of like going into modernity or going into the modern era of football, all these other things. All things that are the modern era of football were also the 70s era of football, which were also the 60s era of football, which are also the 90s era of football. Like, we just ebb and flow, and like things become more popular, less popular, then they become more popular later again, and all these other things. Like, the idea of getting into like the modern day NFL is like, it's a convoluted conversation, but it's a good talking piece and it's a good barrier to you, or not barrier, but barometer to utilize. What are you seeing in today's NFL and how do you capture that? Even though it's all just rehashes of older things and more traditional things. But I'm glad that the Saints went that route. And so I think that that's the thing that they're looking at to say, okay, here's how the team improves in 2024. Keep the roster as intact as you can, which again, the Saints didn't have many big time departures. I didn't factor the loss of Andres Pete into the offensive line because he didn't start week 1, but he's another one of those losses, right? You got to make sure, I got to make sure I include him there. And so I think that that's the way that they find that, is they try to keep the roster as intact as possible going for 2023 and 2024, because from 2022 to 2023, they said, oh, it's the roster. And then they fixed the roster. But then you didn't change the scheme, and then the roster performed the same way that the roster performed before in the same scheme. Shocker. The scheme didn't change, therefore the results didn't either. So now in 2024, you're hoping that the scheme change also brings the success. And again, this is a mostly offensive conversation because the Saints defense is stellar. Like, it's still good. Like, they have to improve as a run defense, sure, but keeping points off the board has to be the number one priority. And so the passing defense being good has to be, a big focus. And so we'll see if they can improve the run defense. But even if they can't and they hit the 20s to 15s again, they should still be a top 10 defense. We said that last year. That ended up being the case. Now, I do think that the Saints have other moves that they could make that will still improve their team. I maintain that going out and signing Dalton Risner would immediately make this team's offensive line better. Now, let me be more specific. Because making your offensive line better than it is right now, not a statement. But I think that adding Dalton Risner gives you the potential to make your offensive line better than it was last year, because Trevor Penning should be better in 2024 than he was in 2023. That's just how time works. Taliesin Fuanga is probably a better option right now than 2024's version of Ryan Ramczyk that's dealing with this stuff, that has the medical question marks, that's reportedly lost weight, all these other things. Fuanga is probably just a better option right now. Not a better option 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, but probably a better option now. So Dalton Risner makes your offensive line better, because I think that he would be better than James Hurst. I think he would be better than Andres Pete, the left guard version of Andres Pete before he reached his final Frieza form out there at left tackle. I still think that ends up boosting what you can be. And he's got familiarity with the scheme, offensive coordinator, all that. The other place that I think that you can make an improvement is still at wide receiver. You could do that with maybe Hunter Renfrow, but boy, are the options at wide receiver now low with Tyler Boyd off the market. You trade for Treylon Burks. I don't know if that makes your team better. I think he's a massive question mark too. So I don't know, but maybe that's another place where you can go out there and find some improvement. But you do those two things. You do one of those two things. You improve the offensive line. You add another veteran there, whatever. That's not just Shane Lemieux and Justin Herron. We'll see what happens with them. Don't get me wrong, but man, you go out there and find a guy that's a bona fide starter at left guard, then all of a sudden, yeah, okay, we can have a conversation about how not only did the offensive coaching staff improve, but the offensive line improved, and therefore the offense should be better. But right now, you're relying on the scheme. Very much relying on the scheme, which is a different message than what the Saints sent last year. We'll see if it all comes together for them. Coming up next, what are you looking for in rookie mini camps? Well, first of all, I want to see Spencer Rattler throw. We got all that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. I'm recording this here on Wednesday night for the Thursday episode, and this is an hour before Nicki Minaj kicks off over at the Smoothie King Center. Opened up the Game Time app, $44 for a ticket. $44, an hour before the event kicks off, and that's probably going to drop even further right when the event starts as well. That's why I love Game Time. I can be spontaneous. I can say, you know what? I'm going to go and check out the Nicki Minaj concert. I could buy a ticket for $44. I can save by doing so. It just doesn't get any better than this. I didn't have to plan for months. I only had to plan for moments. And it's moments like this that I'm really, really grateful for Game Time if I wanted to go to a Nicki Minaj concert. Now, if it was Kendrick, or even if it was just Metro playing BBL Drizzy over and over again, I'd go to check that out. So make sure you go and check out Game Time today. It's also great for your NBA tickets as well, with the NBA being in the playoffs if you're in an area where there's still playoff basketball being played, unlike here in New Orleans. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDO and NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. You might not get to see a lot over at minicamp. No offense versus defense, but boy, there's still a lot of takeaways that we're excited to see while we get out there later on this weekend for New Orleans Saints minicamps on Airline Drive. So let's break down some of the things that we're looking at seeing, starting off, of course, with Spencer Rattler throwing a football. We appreciate you very much as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we are your team every day. Make sure you come back tomorrow. We're going to be breaking down more of what we expect to see during rookie mini camps, and of course, giving you more on the biggest stories from around the New Orleans Saints. And I want to start off with Spencer Rattler here today because he's the guy that most everybody's excited about, right? Like this is like the pinnacle example of the most popular player on any football team is typically the backup quarterback. And when it's a rookie backup quarterback with a high ceiling, this is a different, that takes it to another level, right? It's a whole different monster, a whole different beast. So Spencer Rattler is somebody that I'm looking forward to seeing at rookie mini camps. Again, as I've made well known, I've had my reservations around him throughout the draft process and all those other things. So I'm excited to see him with my own eyes, off tape, see him on the field, seeing the velocity when he lets the ball go, see the way that he, gets everybody together. I want to see him and Jake Haener be more assertive than the veteran quarterback and Nathan Peterman. I'm also curious to see if Derek Carr is going to be there. We'll see. But that's the thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing with Spencer Rattler. It's not just about like, what does the ball look like when he throws it? That's fine. I can see that on tape anytime. But how is he working with Andrew Janocko? How is he working with Klint Kubiak? How is he working with those wide receivers? Does he take a leadership role? Is he the vocal quarterback instead of the veteran and Nathan Peterman and all that? And look, the Saints just moved on from one of their veteran quarterbacks like we've been saying that they were going to do eventually. And look, it'll only be a matter of time before they move on from the other one too. But Kellen Mond, now released, not a part of the organization any longer. Team moved on from him less than a month after they brought him in. And that's not surprising. Like him and Nathan Peterman were kind of brought in because of their ties to either players that are there in Nathan Peterman's case, coaches that are there in both of their cases. They were guys to come in and kind of help bridge the gap between Derek Carr and Andrew Janocko, Derek Carr and Klint Kubiak, all that. And really the offense and those guys too. And that role now, it was short-lived for Kellen Mond after the New Orleans Saints drafted Spencer Rattler in the 5th round, which just kind of felt like the writing was on the wall at that point. That's one of the reasons why I had a lot of people come to me and say, oh my God, the Saints have 6 quarterbacks on the roster. They have 5 quarterbacks on the roster. What are they thinking? Who cares? Who cares? Doesn't matter. It's the 90-man roster. They're not going to bring 5 quarterbacks onto the 53-man roster, and it's not keeping them from adding anybody onto their roster, because if they wanted to add them onto the roster, they would just add them onto the roster anyway and then move on from somebody else. So it didn't really impede them from doing anything, but we always knew that those 2 veteran quarterbacks probably weren't going to hang around for a super long time. And that certainly ended up being the case for Kellen Mond. And now we get to see Spencer Rattler, and we get to see Jake Haener, and we get to see the battle for QB2, which I think is firmly implanted between the 2 of them. No offense to Nathan Peterman, but like we've seen what Nathan Peterman can and can't do at the NFL level. I think that right now, when it comes to Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler, that's probably your battle. That's probably your battle going into the QB2 conversation. Next thing that I want to see is the beginning of what is sure to be the offseason of Bub Means. Bub Means, the wide receiver out of Pittsburgh, I feel like is going to be one of those training camp all-star, training camp superstars, just because like people aren't super familiar with what his game is and all those other things, having played at Pitt, having bad quarterback play over there. Like there's so much that we don't really know about Bub Means that has nothing to do with Bub Means, but has everything to do with the system that he was in, the situation that he was in, all that. I believe, if I remember correctly, Pitt initially got their quarterback as a transfer from Boston College and finished the season at an entirely different position by the time that it was all said and done. That's how bad the quarterback situation was at Pitt. So could Bub Means be a better pro than collegiate player? This happens all the time. It happened with, help me. You can't, because I can talk to you. You can't talk to me. The BYU wide receiver that went to the Los Angeles Rams. You know who I'm talking about. Sorry. It could happen. It could happen for Bub Means. And it all begins with rookie minicamp, right? And that'll be our first opportunity to really see him out on the field, get a glimpse at what it is that he could be, couldn't be, whatever it might be. But we can't really like base huge assumptions based on what we see here, because there's no offense versus defense. They're not running. They're probably not going to even run routes full speed for the most part, things like that. Like there's just going to be certain things there that's going to be kind of throttled back. And we're only going to be able to see so much. But hey, getting to see an early look at Bub Means and where he's, how he's being utilized, all these other things, where he's running routes from, all that could be interesting. Let's go to, of course, Taliesin Fuang. I want to see the athleticism. I don't even need to see him touch anybody. I'm cool with that. I don't need to see him going up against the defensive line. I just want to watch him move, dude. Like watching him move on tape is so impressive. I want to see him move IRL in real life. I want to see him do it. Like that's going to be super fun for me. And I think that's going to be a big thing that you're looking at going into this one, because that was the thing that made Ryan Ramczyk so special, was the elite athleticism. My apologies. And so I'm hoping that with Taliesin Fuang, we get an early look at that elite athleticism that he packs as well. Oh, how about Dallin Holker? Get an opportunity to kind of see all the different things that he can do. We get to see those big long arms and the catch radius and all those other things. Again, we're not going to be able to see him beat coverage. We're not going to be able to see him make contested catches, all those other things. But if we get an opportunity just to see him run some routes, if we get an opportunity just to see like what his build looks like, if we get an opportunity to see the catch radius, does he go up and snag one somewhere or whatever? Like those are the things that we're going to be looking for. And again, like I'm not trying to go like 0 to 100 on any of these guys or anything. Well, I am. I'm in between 0 to 100. I'm not trying to go 100 on any of these guys, UDFAs and stuff like that. I know that like that's something that tends to be the assumed case, but that's not really what we're going for here. It's that like, can Dallin Holker start to prove that he can be a 40? You know what I mean? 40 out of 100. Like, can he prove to be a 40 and everything? And it's like, good. That means that he can fight for a spot and he can, try to raise his floor and all those other things. So this gives us an opportunity to really see like, are the things that we think make Dallin Holker special, the things that really make him special? And is he able to bring that from college to the NFL? We get an opportunity to see a little bit of that this week. And then maybe we'll get an opportunity to see a little bit of who the younger options are on the roster at left guard, right? I don't know if Nick Saldiveri is going to be out there or is even going to be able to be out there, depending upon how long his rehab process is over the course of the offseason, all those other things. But with it being rookie minicamp, he might not even be out there. He might not be showing up until vet minis. But in whatever case, like who are the other guys that they're cycling in there, right? And I did a little name mix up between Kyler Braw and Kyle Hergel. And Hergel is the guy that I was thinking about out of Boston College, the interior offensive lineman that is somebody to watch at left guard or on the interior as a whole. So getting an opportunity to see him, get an opportunity to see Sincere Haynesworth and where he ends up playing. Hopefully at center, we get to see him there and things like that out of Tulane. So I think that those are all things that I'm really interested in seeing. And obviously the offensive line, trying to just figure out who the young pieces are on the offensive line is really important. The Saints also not only moved on from Kellen Mond, but they moved on from Tommy Kramer, another offensive lineman that spent most of the time on the practice squad last year, played in 3 games, mostly for special teams purposes, field goal, extra point kind of units. And then also spent like 7 snaps at right tackle and then 1 snap as like the jumbo tight end or whatever, a couple snaps as a jumbo tight end. And so they moved on from him, but now they moved on from him and James Hurst retired. Ryan Ramczyk, we'll see what happens with him. Andrews Pete doesn't get re-signed. Like the exodus of offensive linemen, the attrition of offensive linemen is notable. So getting to see some of those younger guys, maybe hopefully Mark Evans out of UAPB, like do we get an opportunity to see him a little bit more in his second year at rookie minis? I'm just curious to see who's going to be kind of like involved in that conversation so that we can get ready to see who all will be in that rotation come training camp as well. So look, again, we're not going to be able to take away who's good, who's bad out of training camp and all these other things or rookie mini camps. We won't be able to take that out of training camp either, by the way. But we're not going to be able to take that out of mini camps, but does give us a little bit of insight in terms of like where things lie for the New Orleans Saints as they begin to lay down the building blocks of the scheme, which is maybe the next thing that we get a little bit of a glimpse at is just, do we notice anything different in terms of how they're installing, what the language is, things like that? All that will be interesting as well. Like the Saints aren't going to show their hand at rookie minicamps. You know what I mean? It'll be very vanilla, but there might be things about the process that are different during rookie minicamps that stand out. Like which coach is the loudest, all those other things that you want to see, right? So that's what I got from rookie minicamp. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This one was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you as well. Just taking a look at like where the Saints really, truly are. And even if those improvements haven't come in droves the way that you might have hoped, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've gotten worse either. Like those are 2 different conversations. So we'll see if they can find a way to improve the product on the field. And it all begins this weekend with rookie mini camps. Excited to bring you those reports all throughout the weekend. Appreciate you very much, as always, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day and a part of your routine. And of course, for making us your first listen of the day here every single day. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Pelicans, Locked On LSU as your second listen today. So like I mentioned, thank you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.